Let's have a deep discussion about Bowen Byram. The rumor about his house being empty, but more than that, his season. Is a trade a good option? Who could they trade for Byram? And we'll talk about a contract extension as well. All ahead as we talk Byram here on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody, and welcome into this Thursday edition of the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on our YouTube channel where you can watch the show. And if you do, be sure to like and subscribe there. And if you would like to become a part of our Locked On Sabres text club, that's available to you as well. Head over to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSabres to sign up so that you could be the first to breaking news updates, like when the Sabres hire Eric Stahl to be their not their senior advisor, but special assistant to the general manager. Yesterday's show got a little wild, and it was nice to see that I did have a lot of listeners and fans that felt the same way I did. I know we probably still are in the minority, the fans that are actually upset about Eric Stahl being a part of the organization. One day later, I'm like, whatever. That's fine. Whatever. I don't really care. We'll probably won't hear from him ever. I mean, he's never going to do press conferences with his job title. I don't think he's going to have much impact on the front office. I mean, maybe he becomes, imagine someday in the future, Adams becomes president of hockey ops, and then you got Stahl as the GM, but that's probably pretty far-fetched. So, a lot to get to on today's episode here. Sneaky Joe DiBiase, thanks for listening. Today's episode is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Today, another series in our exit interviews. We already talked about Thompson. We talked about Dahlin. Today, in part because he's a little bit in the news, and I think he is the player to watch this offseason. We're going to talk about Bowen Byram, who I believe could have very well played his final game for the Buffalo Sabres. And if he hasn't, then we got to figure out what a contract is going to look like for Bo Byram. Before we get to that later in today's show, I also have some Byram trade ideas, hockey trade ideas, most notably if the Sabres were to move the young defenseman, only 23 years old still, even though he has been in the league for now 5 seasons, but he did debut at 19 years old right away for Colorado. So a lot to get to on that front. You've had the NHL playoffs roll along, and that's all been really good. Last night, Toronto takes a 2-0 series lead. In the AHL, haven't ignoring the Amherst, we just have 2 weeks between games. Incredible. It's a 13-day gap between the final game that the Amherst played against Syracuse last Thursday, a week ago today. They don't play again until next Wednesday against the Laval Rocket. That'll be at 7:05 in Rochester. That's a crazy time in between. When we talked to Michael Leone, the Amherst head coach, last week, he said he didn't like the scheduling, how spread out it was. And that was when there were only 3-4 days in between games. This is 13 days in between games. Really tough to stay sharp. So we look forward to the Amherst returning to action, though, next week. Let's jump right in on Bo Byram and how his season went and what's ahead, trade, contract. We'll get to it all. But first, let's start with what happened this past season for Bo Byram. He had a healthy year, and I would guarantee he even said this, I think, in his postseason press conference, that a goal of his was to play a full season. And even when you say that, you might think he missed a game or two. You play 75 games, 78 games, and you consider that basically a full season. Bowen Byram, who, when he was traded to the Buffalo Sabres, one of the talking points, one of the reasons that he was available, and one of the reasons that the Sabres had taken on some risk was injuries and a concussion history in that for Bo Byram. He comes to Buffalo, and that was known. Hey, injury is a question. A little bit like Josh Norris here, except Byram's concussion, Norris to his shoulder. It's part of what you're taking on is an injury risk. Well, through a year and a half, no injuries. full 82 game season, played every single game. I think that's a pretty big accomplishment for a player that was a question about. So big for Bo Byram on that front. Now, how did it go otherwise? In my opinion, it went pretty good. It didn't go great. I would not say it went great. It is looking like a win, though, in my mind, for that trade. Now, you shouldn't count too much what's happened with Casey Mittelstadt after he has left. But you look back on that deal, and Mittelstadt has fallen off a bit and has not really ascended to being a consistent second-line center like he looked like in that final season for the Sabres. He instead has kind of reverted back to a lot of what we saw early in his career. And meanwhile, Byram plays a healthy year and takes a step up in his game. Still not a perfect player by any means, but I think is looking like a pretty darn good defenseman. But there are a lot of inconsistencies, and there is a teammate-specific problem with Bo Byram now. But first, before we get into that, how about the numbers? The numbers at the end of the year, 82 games played, 7 goals, 31 assists for 38 points, averaging a career high 22 minutes and 42 seconds of ice time. Everything except his goal total was a career high. He had a year where last year, actually, he scored 11, and the year prior, he scored 10 in 42 games, by the way. This year, it was just 7 goals in 82 games played. Now, this will be one part of our equation here as we figure out what's ahead with Bo Byram. Byram had all that production almost entirely at 5-on-5. Byram ranked 15th in the NHL among all defensemen for even strength points. The reason 35 of the 38, the reason his point total is only at 38 is this player played very few minutes on the power play. Dahlin was the number 1 power play defenseman, and Owen Power was the number 2 power play defenseman. And listen, that is a part of the reason I think he might want out. But we'll get to that. The season for Byram, to me, is encapsulated in one narrative that is about Byram. And remember, a narrative, oftentimes is true. And in this case, the numbers back it up. The Sabres must have thought so because they experimented at the end with him in different situations, and it didn't go that well. The narrative on Byram, and I believe it, and I think that it's backed up by a lot of evidence, statistical and watching the games, is that Byram only plays at a very high level when Rasmus Dahlin is his partner. Now, the way I see Byram is I like him as a Dahlin partner a lot because when Dahlin is creating and is got his head up and he's always looking for the perfect pass and he's often able to make that perfect pass, I like the style of Byram, who is a defenseman that has got the speed and the skill to jump up in the play and be aggressive because he's a good enough skater to get back on his own end if he gets caught a little bit. And he's also got a pretty good shot for a defenseman. He's a pretty good finisher for his position. And pairing that with Dahlin, I think is a really good mix. I think you have more upside with Byram as a Dahlin partner than you would with just any old replacement level defenseman. So I do like that, but I need more. And all the numbers for Byram without Dahlin look really poor. And when he had to play a bigger role when Dahlin was missing during the 13-game losing streak, Byram cratered his production in that period of time when Dahlin was out. And I love the player when he's with Dahlin, but you got to give me more than, oh, you're able to play great when you're with one of the 5 best defensemen in hockey. Congratulations. After, by the way, I have to look back at the numbers. I'm sure he played a lot with Kel McCarr in Colorado and would have had the benefit of him and Devin Tays being a part of that blue line over with the Avalanche. So some of those numbers, by the way, if you are interested, for Byram with and without Rasmus Dahlin, his expected goals for percentage with Dahlin was 54.5%. And without was 41.9%, a 13% drop with him. Now, again, I like a guy that could play with Dahlin like that, but you got to give me more if you're worth $8-9 million a year. And what I would have loved to see where I would have been let down the most by Byram was his ability to play with Owen Power. And because what you would love is, hey, if Byram is really good playing with Power and those two can create this awesome second pairing, one of the best second pairings in hockey, because they both have the talent to do it. Super talented guys. Power, the number 1 overall pick. Byram, the number 4 overall pick. Guys have the talent to do it. But for whatever reason, when they do play together, it just doesn't mesh well. I don't know if it's the styles of the two where, Power likes to slow the game down a little bit, and Byram is a little bit more go, go, go. At least that's when they have the puck. I couldn't tell you why it doesn't really work in their own end between the two of them. But whatever it is, you look at him with and without Power, and I mentioned he goes down 13 percentage points in expected goals for when he's with and without Dahlin. With Power, he gets worse. He is 44.4% expected goals with Power, 49% without. Now, a lot of that 49% is with Dahlin. But still, he's worse with Power, and 44% is a terrible number. You need better than that. And that's just one number. There's a million you could look at. You could look at when they were on the ice. What was the score? How about that? When they were on the ice together, I guess it was even. It was 19-19. But when you got two talented guys like that, you got to be... For comparison's sake, again, not to compare Power to Dahlin in every instance here, but with Byram and Power on the ice at the same time, the Sabres score this year was 19-19. With Dahlin and Byram on the ice at the same time this year, it was 35-15 in favor of the Buffalo Sabres. So for me, he let me down in that I would have liked to see him become an Owen Power partner rather than a Rasmus Dahlin partner, because Dahlin can play pretty well with almost anybody. So at the end of the day, that's the story on Byram. He is a very talented player. He is still only 23 years old. He could definitely get better, I think, and I might expect he will get a little bit better. He's pretty physical for his size. He will stand up for teammates. He got in a fight this year against that ECHL dude from Detroit that was hammering him while he was on the ice, which was one of the dirtiest things I saw all year. And a guy with a concussion history that legitimately made me mad when that happened. But Byram was a willing combatant, and he'll throw his body around, and he can skate, and he's got a shot. There is just a little bit missing for me when it comes to the mental elements of his game, when it comes to the right decision-making with the puck. That is where I'd give him an A in a lot of categories, but if I were grading his puck management skills right now, I'd give him like a C. There's a lot of plays that he doesn't see that I think are right now preventing him from being a legitimate number 1 defenseman. But again, only 23 years old, I think that's something he can improve on as his career goes on. So with all of that being said, pretty good year from Bo Byram. Wouldn't say perfect. He played without Dahlin in the final 2 months of the year because the Sabres, I think, wanted to look at what he looks like without Dahlin. And Kevyn Adams has never wanted to mention his name when talking about the core of this hockey team. And it looked like they saw and know all the Byram Dahlin numbers and said at the final 2 months, well, before we decide on whether or not to pay him, let's see what he looks like with other guys. And then it didn't look so great. So that leads us to our next conversation. What is next for Bo Byram? I've got a couple of trade ideas, and we'll talk about what an extension would look like if that were to happen. Coming up on Locked On Sabres. Today's episode is presented by Indeed. Just realized your business needed to hire somebody yesterday. Well, how can you find amazing candidates fast? Well, that's easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed Sponsored Jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. If you've ever been in that spot where you need the right hire like yesterday, that pressure is on, and every day without the right person is a setback. And that's exactly when Indeed Sponsored Jobs comes in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now, you could speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Today's episode of Locked On Sabres is also presented by Amazon Fire TV. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? You could turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign in to the Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. And you can dive in on EA Sports College Football 25, which I played. It's a great game. Call of Duty Black Ops 6, Avowed, the NHL 25 video game. As easily as you stream your favorite shows, it's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With 4K streaming, you watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribe services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and so many more. So, all those high quality Xbox games that we mentioned, you get those at a fraction of the price of the cost of a console. And if you already have a console, Fire TV Stick 4K, again, affordable, easy way to travel around. You know, I'm in an online dynasty in my NCAA tournament, and like when I go away, like I am this weekend, I got to tell all the guys, like, hey, you guys got to wait till Sunday until I get back to advance the league. If I get that Amazon Fire TV Stick, well, now I take it with me, and I could play a game real quick when I've got some downtime. So it's very easy for traveling. So again, Amazon Fire TV, be sure to go to the website, amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on selected devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, Fire TV 4K Max, and Fire TV Cube. Back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. All right, I've got some Bo Byram trade ideas for you. If you would like to throw a couple my way, hit us up on our text club. Join subtext.com/Locked On Sabres. That's if you're not already a subscriber, you can sign up there. I have got 4-ish trade ideas for Bo Byram, and I'm going to stick for this exercise, knowing that, hey, they could trade Byram if they don't want to sign him for a first-round pick and a prospect. And I'm not even sure Sabre fans would be that mad at that if there was an understanding that those assets would get earmarked to spin around and trade for another veteran at either the same position or a different position this offseason, and not just to stockpile more future assets. So that is possible. What I would like to stick with the theme of, though, is the types of trades that Kevyn Adams has made in the last year and a half, 2 years that I've liked. Hockey trades. One of which included this player, Bo Byram. Casey Middlestat to Colorado for Bo Byram. Another, of course, was one that just happened at the deadline. Dylan Cousins for Josh Norris. So swapping player for player. And for this, I kind of want to stick with a defenseman. And maybe these aren't that realistic because why would the guy get traded? I did try to pick a couple of teams, though, that would be let down with how their season ended. And if they're looking for a shakeup or if they're looking to get younger, maybe it's just a team that loved Bo Byram as a prospect and has loved some of the high marks of his game in his career and want to explore the possibility of him being a number one defenseman. If I were Kevyn Adams calling teams right now about Bo Byram, my sales pitch would be, I mean, obviously if you're selling an asset, you don't want to say anything negative, but when asked why I'm trading him, if I'm Kevyn Adams, I'm saying, well, to be frank, he's got the capabilities of being a number one defenseman, and we don't need him to be anything more than a number 3 defenseman. So we'd like to sell that high potential, that upside to you, because you could use a guy becoming a not just immediate number one defenseman, but a guy that could for 10 years be your number one defenseman because he's so young. So that's kind of what I was shooting for when thinking about some of these trades for defensemen. But I do have one that is not for a defenseman, and it's going to be revisiting a trade idea we talked a lot about more than any other trade this past season. And that's Elias Pettersson. Let's revisit Pettersson for a moment in time, because I think he's less on the trade market than he was in the middle of the year when JT Miller was still there and Rick Tocchet was still the head coach. But I don't know how much bad will there is between Pettersson and that organization right now. So if I were Adams and I were looking to trade Byram, that would be the first team I call just to see, hey, any chance Pettersson, like we could revisit that, rekindle that trade conversation. Sometimes those things get put off from the middle of the season to an off season. Now, the problem is that the trade that was reportedly discussed between these two sides in the season is no longer possible because the Sabres traded Dylan Cousins to Ottawa. And Dylan Cousins with Bo Byram and a prospect or a pick was the perceived package. You could just throw Josh Norris into the trade. I personally would not do that, though, because I think he's about to be their number one center, and I would be surprised if the Sabres moved him that quickly. If you told me, though, it will take Josh Norris with Bo Byram to get him, I'd probably say yes. Now, the trade that I have, though, that I think is more realistic from what Vancouver would want, because I think they would rather have a young, promising center over a little bit older, injury-prone center, and you take a pick out because of that. The trade idea I have for Pettersson is Bo Byram and Yuri Kulik. And that's one you're gonna have to swallow hard on that, because that is a tough trade to make. Kulik is gonna be a guy. He's gonna be a good player. But I'm not buying on hope anymore. I think Yuri Kulik is going to become a year-to-year top 6 centerman in the National Hockey League. But I am exhausted by watching young guy after young guy show promise when they show up and then fail to take that next step. And not everybody's done that. JJ Peterka did take that next step. But for every Peterka, you've got a Jack Quinn that didn't do it, right? So I'm not saying I don't think Kulik will become that guy. I do. But there is still some uncertainty with Yuri Kulik because of his age and because it's only 62 games that he's done it in. And again, it's only 24 points. It's not like he came in and was a 60-point rookie. If he had done that, then I'd be an absolute no. But 9 assists as a centerman, like there are elements of his game that need to get better. So Pettersson for Kulik and Byram. I think that's one that I'd find a lot of Sabre fans that wouldn't want to do that. I personally would, because I want to get as much superstar talent as I can, and I still believe that Pettersson is that level of player. Now, to the hockey trade, the defenseman hockey trade ideas that I've got. I'll start with one that I think is less likely and then two that it might be a little bit more likely. And I'll start in Calgary. Calgary had a year that they didn't love. They missed the playoffs. And that's a team that's been trying to push in, and they've been willing to make big changes. So I don't think this player is on the market, but I had to include him because I love the hockey. I love the player. Mackenzie Weegar of the Calgary Flames. And he is a right shot defenseman. He is a little bit older at 31 years old. Mackenzie Weegar is an awesome defenseman. Like, he is a legitimate top pair right shot defenseman, veteran player. He's played in the playoffs with Florida at least. And he's got all the good fancy numbers that you want. He's a good possession player. He shuts plays down. He can score goals, scored 20 goals, not this past year, but the year prior. I like Mackenzie Weegar a lot. And the sales pitch there would be, hey, Calgary, I know this player right now is better than Bo Byram, but if you're interested, this guy is 8 years younger. You want to do it? You want to flip your number one defenseman for a potential number one defenseman you could have an extra decade with if he turns into that type of player? That would be the idea. And Byram, the other reason to pick Calgary is Byram is from the Vancouver area, but you're getting a lot closer to home when you go to Calgary instead of Buffalo. So that one, though, I don't think Weegar is almost at all on the market. He's such a good player. Now, two guys that might be a little bit more likely because you've seen their name in trade rumors in the past. One recently, and that's Noah Dobson from the New York Islanders. Bo Byram, and by the way, the Weegar trade been the same thing. It'd be Byram and something modest. You know, you're not trading Zach Benson, but maybe you're doing Byram and a pick swap, like you're moving down in the first round, or maybe you're doing Byram and Isak Rozan, or Byram and a B-level prospect for Weegar. That would be the same thing for Dobson. Noah Dobson, a little bit older, but not too much on the age from Bo Byram, 25 years old as opposed to Byram's 23. Dobson, not this past year, but the year prior, had a career-high 70 points. Second Islander defenseman ever to have 70 points with Dennis Potvin. He scored double-digit goals 4 years in a row. He plays big minutes. The past 2 seasons, he's been over 23 minutes. 2 years ago, 23-24. Now, that was the big year for Dobson. Noah Dobson, right shot defenseman, by the way, for the Islanders. If you're not that familiar with him, he's big. 6'4", 200 pounds, good skater, good puck mover. And he's also, I would say, well-rounded at shutting down plays. Now, the thing is, he might not have been as good at that this past season. I have seen a ton of complaints from New York Islander fans that what happened? He finished 8th in the Norris voting the year before. He was one of the 10 best defensemen in the world. And what happened? He fell off. and a lot of the numbers went down, and Team Canada left him off the roster because he was having a down year. There was injury stuff, I guess, at the beginning of the year, but he played 71 games. The reason I include Dobson is because I'm constantly seeing his name in trade rumors. You know, maybe on the lower level of trade rumors. Like, I don't got Friedman out here saying that he's being shopped, but I see a lot of Islanders people that are at least discussing it. And even more so now that Matthew Schaefer, who I bet is the favorite right now to be the number 1 overall pick that the Islanders won, he's a defenseman. So they might be more willing to move on from Dobson because they have this 18-year-old number 1 defenseman that's about to walk through the door and join their ranks on the blue line. Now, one thing, though, about Dobson that will make it tough to acquire him, if he's even on the market, you might have to overpay a lot because the Islanders might be spooked because they just traded Devin Tays. I guess that was 5 years ago now, but they traded Devin Tays 5 years ago after just 2 years at age 25, the same age that Noah Dobson is. And he has turned into one of the best two-way defensemen in the NHL. Now, he's playing with Kel McCarr, and that helps, but he's been awesome for 5 years in Colorado. He is a guy that's made Team Canada. So they might be spooked by, 5 years ago, we traded a guy at the same age with really good talent, and he went off and became an awesome top pair defenseman. We don't want to do that again. So Byram and something for Dobson, I think, would be necessary to get him because he's had the big breakout year that Byram hasn't quite had. So Dobson is another idea. And then this one is my favorite. And his name is less in trade rumors, but you'll see it once in a while. Colton Parayko of the St. Louis Blues, who was just, in this series against Winnipeg, and he's on the ice when they give up that last second goal. In fact, I think it was his man in front of the net. But even with that, Parayko is a very good defensive defenseman. And, the offensive game has maybe not ever fully formed to the point where he's thought of as one of the best defensemen in the world because, he just doesn't put up the points to get that type of respect. And I don't think he is one of the best defensemen in the world. He does score goals. Back-to-back seasons with double-digit goals. He scored 16 this year in 64 games, which was easily his best. It was more than double his career shooting percentage, 12.8% off a career high of 5.1. I was looking at Evolving Hockey today, though, in some of his cards for goals above replacement on defense, some of his defensive metrics, and he ranks super highly almost every single year. Especially this past year, he did that. Really, it's been like 3-4 years in a row that he's been well above average as a defensive defenseman. It's funny. You go back to the 22-23 season, his Evolving Hockey page, it's been better since then. But his defensive rating was 85 out of 100. His offensive rating was 1. Again, his offensive rating has gone. That's an anomaly. This past year, it was a 88 offensively. So that being said, Parayko, though, right shot defenseman, big, physical, 6'6", 229 pounds. He is the guy I'm thinking of as the Owen Power partner. And that's what a lot of these players that I'm mentioning, Weegar, Dobson, Parayko, what I'm doing in my exercise of trying to trade Bo Byram is I am trying to swap him a Dahlin partner for a Power partner. And it's tough to know what Parayko would look like with Owen Power without seeing it. But I know Byram doesn't work with Power. So I'd rather take a shot at a guy like that. And you could guess, he's 6'6". He's a stay-at-home defenseman. He's big. He's physical. He's got a big shot. And maybe that all of that will help alleviate some of the pressure on Owen Power to always be, a great defensive defenseman too. Maybe he could focus more on his puck skills and he can kind of, just have a little bit more margin for error if you're Owen Power. So I think I like the Parayko idea the most. The one thing about Parayko, though, is the contract. He's 31 years old, and he's under contract until 2030. So I think that's fine. It'll be a UFA at age 37. Sometimes in those deals, you got to take on a couple of years at the end when the player's probably past his prime in order to get the player right now. And one of the things I think the Sabres will like about Colton Parayko is his salary goes down. The Sabres love a high cap hit with a low base salary. And they don't do that a lot anymore. Not these next 2 years, but the final 3 years of his contract, you've got $6.5 million cap hits with $4.8 million base salaries. So, add that up, and that's $5 million of real money that you don't have to spend that shows up on your cap. And the Sabres have been known to go for some deals like that. So I like Parayko the most. He'll cost a lot, though. Probably Bo Byram. Same thing. I think all these guys, Bo Byram plus something to get the deal done. Let me know what you think on any of these deals or if you've got one of your own. And then quickly when we come back, I don't think an extension will happen, but what would it look like if an extension happened for Bo Byram? Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast is presented by Monarch Money. If you ever checked your bank account and wondered where did all the money go between dining out and online shopping, for me, golf, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. So instead of juggling all those different apps, you could use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Today's episode of Locked On Sabres is also presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NHL and NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night has been delivering highlight reel performances, comebacks, upsets. It's been awesome on both ends of the playoffs so far, and FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off, before puck drop, and live. With player props, performance trends, same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. If you are new to FanDuel, it is the perfect time to sign up. Right now, if you get a first $5 bet hits, you get a $200 bonus. So go check that out. Find a parlay you like. Go find a goal scorer prop that you like. There's a lot of good stuff out there. Ovechkin tonight, maybe against Carolina. And again, if your $5 bet wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Head to FanDuel.com. Place your first $5 bet right now. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Wrapping things up here in the Locked On Sabres podcast with a little bit of a Bo Byram extension conversation. I do not think that an extension will happen, but it's definitely within the realm of possibility. Definitely. I mean, he is an RFA and 2 years away from UFA status. So if the Sabres don't find a trade they like, you could just sign him. Now, what I would believe is that you're only getting a 1 or a 2 year deal done. The least likely outcome, in my opinion, is that the Sabres and Byram get a 7-year contract done. I said this a little bit earlier, but to reiterate, if I'm going to go into it in full detail, the reason I think Byram, even above Buffalo and the organization and the team not winning, that he might want out is he can't put the numbers up here that he can in other places because he doesn't play power play. I mean, a lot of these top two defensemen, they'll put up 35 even strength points like Bo Byram has, but they'll add in 20 power play points, and bam, you got a 55, 60 point defenseman that's making $10 million a year. And with Byram, he's going to have a tough time ever cracking 40 because all his production has to come at even strength. Dahlin, for example, you might think Dahlin puts up more even strength numbers than he does. This past year, Dahlin had 28 even strength points, fewer than Byram in more minutes. The year prior, he had 28. The year before that, he had 37. That was his big year offensively. 28 before that, 14, 19, 19. He had 37 power or even strength points once. A lot of Dahlin's production comes on the power play. And that's not just Dahlin. That's all the top defensemen, or at least a lot of them. And Byram doesn't get that benefit. And listen, those numbers matter when you're in contract negotiations. So if I'm Byram and I'm Byram's agent, I say, thanks, Buffalo. I like it here. I maybe even like the guys here. But, man, what's best for me, what's best for me is finding a way to get that $10 million contract. And the only way I do that is if I'm your top power play defenseman. And I understand that will never happen here. I understand that I'm not Rasmus Dahlin, but I would like to go find a team that doesn't have a Rasmus Dahlin. If I were Byram, that's what I would do. So, and it sounds like that is his thought process as well. So all of that to me says you're only doing a 1 or 2 year contract. And if you do, I think a a 2-year deal, not 2 million, geez, a 2-year deal for, let's call it $15 million sounds appropriate. That's $7.5 million per year. I think that's pretty fair, given that it would be a bridge contract, and you would be giving Byram the assurance that you're going to be a UFA if we don't trade you. That, you know, your market value can only increase from here, and $7.5 million I think is a good number for him. So that was the first number that popped into my mind, but I think the more important conversation here is the term. And I think you are definitely not going to find him signing a big long-term contract this summer. But hey, crazier things have happened. The Sabres could just say to Byram, hey, we agree. If on another team you put up 60 points and you're a $10 million defenseman, so why don't we just make you a $10 million defenseman? I mean, I wouldn't do that if I were them, but I guess it's possible. I would rather take that money and use it on a power partner, but that's, my opinion at this point on that front. All right, that'll do it for us today here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. And we got some time between now and the Amerks game. I'm away this weekend, so no show tomorrow, but we will be back on Monday. So excited to talk to you then. If you would like more on the Stanley Cup playoffs, you could, of course, check out Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champ is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We'll talk to you on Monday. Have a good weekend. Talk to you then here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.